Okay, picking back up, let's look at baseline best practice number 6. This one spells out the use of wired equivalent privacy, WEP, temporal key integrity protocol, TKIP, and None as encryption mechanisms that are used in Wi-Fi. And according to this, we should avoid the use of those three. So let's take a closer look at that. Under the security column, far right-hand side of Wi-Fi Explorer, you'll see a listing of the types of security methods that have been put into practice in this particular location. And we can see here that these are all set up to use WPA2 with a pre-shared key. That's what the PSK stands for. So again, according to the baseline best practice, we want to avoid the use of WEP, TKIP, and None. So a little background on that. In 2004, up until 2004, from 1997 to 2004, the type of security that was available for Wi-Fi was known as wired equivalent privacy. And wired equivalent privacy, or WEP, was found to be very, very insecure, easily broken. And once that was noticed and brought to the attention of everybody at IEEE 802.11 working group, they did their thing and started a committee, and the committee's name was Task Group I. So 802.11I was the result of the work done by that committee. 802.11I fixed the known vulnerabilities with WEP. And the way they did it was to take the WEP algorithm and then use software to allow a little front-end preprocessor so that you could type in a passphrase, and this preprocessor would mix your key up and then use it on a changing basis within Wi-Fi. So that was a huge improvement over WEP, which just used a static key and allowed people to guess what that key was. That result was known as temporal key integrity protocol. So TKIP fixed WEP by adding a little software onto the front end of it, but it was still WEP underneath. And the problem with that is that WEP was an old, early form of encryption that was not very fast. And today, if you use WEP on your 802.11n or 802.11ac networks, you're going to be restricted to those old legacy speeds of 54 megabits per second. So even though TKIP has never been broken, it is still at heart a form of WEP and cannot scale up to these speeds. So when I look at this, I see the security is called WPA2, and that's one I haven't mentioned yet. So in 2004, when Task Group I finished their work and they fixed WEP with that first version replacement known as Temporal Key Integrity Protocol, TKIP, that's when the Wi-Fi Alliance took that work and created a cross-vendor certification program to make sure that all vendors who implemented TKIP did it the same way so that everybody's stuff would work with each other. The Wi-Fi Alliance called that new certification program Wi-Fi Protected Access. And Wi-Fi Protected Access is WPA. Now, at the end of 2004, the Task Group I work that was finished with TKIP was replaced with something that would be future-proof, I guess you could say. So to go back again, the very first version that 802.11i came out with was a band-aid to fix the WEP that had been implemented millions and millions of times around the world. But they knew that that wasn't a long-term solution, so they came up with a second solution, and that was a replacement for WEP and TKIP, and that was called CCMP, which is a form of advanced encryption standard, which was created by the US government. So CCMP, in advanced encryption standard, is the solution that we should all be using today. Now, when that was finished up at the end of 2004, Wi-Fi Alliance came back once more and said, okay, now that you've done that work, let's build a cross-vendor certification program that all vendors, for instance, Cisco and Aruba and Netgear, they would all have to prove that they're compatible with this new version, and that way we can, not worry about people using different equipment not being able to connect because of the security methods. And they decided to call that program WPA2. So WPA1 was TKIP, WPA2 technically was CCMP, but they made what I think was a little bit of a mistake there. They said, well, yes, WPA2 technically is CCMP, but we're also going to support as an option TKIP. So when I ask somebody what type of encryption they're using on their Wi-Fi network and they tell me they're using WPA2, I don't really know for sure what kind of encryption. That's just the authentication mechanism. And the reason that's important, you can select WPA2 but choose TKIP when you're setting up your controllers in your network. And if you do that, your network will be limited to 54 megabits per second. Okay? And that's kind of a big deal. If you've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to go to the latest, greatest hardware so you can support 1300 megabits per second, and then you turn on TKIP with WPA2 and everything drops down to 54 megabits per second, it's not a real good value. But we can tell that with Wi-Fi Explorer just by looking here. So we see WPA2, and if that was using TKIP with a pre-shared key, this would say 54 megabits per second. That's how we'd know. So all of these look good. We're using 144 megabits per second, which is the limit of this particular access point. It's 2 streams, and that's the fastest it can go on a 20 megahertz wide channel. But here's another thing to notice. If you look up at the top, you see 3 SSIDs that have no security whatever. And as we said at the beginning of this baseline best practices, that's not good. And the reason why is because if you offer Wi-Fi with no security at all, anybody can attach to your infrastructure. Now, at home, you might not care. But again, there's always security parameters. There's always security things you should be concerned about. Even if you're living in a multi-tenant building and you put Wi-Fi, set up an access point, if you don't put on a password, if you don't use security, someone can attach to your network and they can commit various computer crimes, and it would appear as if you were the one who did that. And that's why you always should put in basic security. So someone can attach to your network and introduce spam into the internet, or they can do worse. They can commit other crimes. If the authorities were to track it down, the source of that computer crime, it would point to the IP address that you had been assigned, and it would look like you did it, and you would have no way to prove it wasn't you. So that happens a lot. You got to be careful. So that's why we say never use none. But in this case, I also noticed something here. So we're not only just not using none, but if I look at the rates, I see the max rate of 11 megabits per second and the max rate of 54 megabits per second. So the types, the vintages of Wi-Fi that were maxed out at 54 megabits per second were 802.11a and 802.11g. We went to 802.11n, it got much faster. This would have to be 802.11n or possibly AC. But when we see the one that says 11 megabits per second, well, that was only 802.11b. 802.11b was only really with us up until 1999. 1999. So this is really old to be on a network today. So both of these get my attention. This got my attention by not having any security. That's not good. But these 2 rates really have me wondering what's going on too. So let's look a little closer at those 2. And the way we do that is scroll over to the other side and look at the SSIDs. And we see that, guess what? These are 3 wireless printers. So HP printers have a bad habit. If you turn on an HP printer and just plug it in, it automatically brings up Wi-Fi. And it brings it up in an old format known as ad-hoc mode. And ad-hoc mode means that the Wi-Fi doesn't need an access point to attach. So these printers, they're thinking they're doing a good thing by bringing up the printer and allowing you to connect directly to the printer to easily print out your documents. So that makes sense from a general standpoint, but the issue here is if that printer is also plugged into your Ethernet network, now you've created a portal into your wireless network that has no security on it. And even though it's a printer, the printer itself wouldn't necessarily give you access to the network, but by having this free access to the printer, someone could inject some types of malware onto the printer, take over the interface, and allow you to access the entire wired side of your network. And you're coming in back behind the firewall, so there's no protection at all, unless you have port-based authentication, which you may have, but most likely don't. So we say this is not a good situation. When you have printers that are wireless capable, you may not even know that they have automatically enabled Wi-Fi and put it into ad hoc mode with no security. Here's how you check on that, make sure. So you'll see here when we look at the recommendations what we can do about that or what we suggest to do about it. So again, based on best practice number 6, we're going to have to fail the school on this one and say you got 3 wireless printers not using any security. And what we suggest is you should look at these wireless printers. Did you know that they had Wi-Fi turned on? Did you intend for that to happen? If so, you should make sure they're not plugged into Ethernet. So either make them completely standalone Wi-Fi, not plugged into the network, or go in and turn off Wi-Fi. Either disable Wi-Fi completely or disconnect the printer from the Ethernet, one of the two. By disconnecting the Ethernet and using the internal Wi-Fi of the printer, that's really not the best situation either. So what we'd really recommend you do is turn off the Wi-Fi in the printer, plug the printer into the Ethernet segment, and then use normal connectivity, connect to an access point to gain access to your printers. Okay, so this screen here give you our best recommendations on what to do in those cases.